And tonight on PM Express, a conversation about the procurement of past questions for the 2021 WASSCE students as they prepare for their final exams. Remember, in 2020, questions were also purchased for students preparing for WASSCE. Now, a minority member today has been raising the questions about value for money for the purchase of a set of exams papers at a unit price of 78 Ghana cedis. There's some comparison also with prices from last year, which makes the conversation even more relevant. So this is it, 34.8 million cedis for WASSCE past questions. That's for 2021 WASSCE students. And the 2020 past questions is also similar to this amount. And the question we're asking, value for money, is there value for money in the purchasing of these materials for the students, even though the minister has explained that it has become imperative to get those question papers for the students. Now, government is to procure over 400,000 WASSCE past questions for final year students. What would they use it? What would it cost the nation to get this? It's 34.8 million cedis for this year at a unit price of 78 Ghana cedis. This has been the bone of contention today in Parliament when the question was posed by Dr. Clement Apaak, and he was asking for questions. Mind you, Dr. Clement Apaak is the deputy ranking member on the Education Committee. So this is the breakdown. There's been some comparative analysis. In 2020, the same past questions were purchased. 568,755 were purchased at the unit price of 59 cedis per unit. And in fact, the Deputy Minister for Education has been explaining why he thinks Dr. Clement Apaak got the figures wrong. Thankfully, he will be coming on this show tonight and he will be explaining further where the confusion is. In 2021, we are purchasing 446,954 at a unit price of 78 Ghana cedis. And of course, this is what has generated. So if you listen to Dr. Apaak in that question he asked in Parliament, he makes the point and explains that, I mean, you look at 59 Ghana cedis from 2020, 2021, 78 Ghana cedis, and a difference of 32.2% increase just last year and this year. And he's asking too many questions. How can just pamphlets made up of photocopies of past questions cost us this amount? And thankfully, he's also on the show tonight. He will be providing some more analysis on this point he's making. Now, according to the minister, in 2020, various publishers approved by NACA submitted their books for pre-qualification procurement processes because there's been issues of sole sourcing for the people who are supposed to procure the past questions to be distributed for the students. And this is the explanation the minister has been giving in Parliament. He indicates that the ministry has contracted Kingdom Books and Stationery to make the supply. Why Kingdom Book? The deputy minister himself is here. He will be throwing more light on that for us. But the question is, value for money, was there competitive tendering? Also, again, he's here. He will be providing the answers. Now, there has been a lot of concerns raised. One of the people who are raising those concerns is the Africa Education Watch, and they have been raising some concerns. They say there are currently over 5,000 schools under trees. Government needs 700 million cedis a year to totally eradicate this. Now, the question is 34.8 million cedis for WASSCE past questions, value for money, and that's the question we are asking tonight. Thankfully, tonight I've been joined in the studio by the Deputy Education Minister, Reverend Tim Fojo, for some clarification. I'm also joined by the Deputy Ranking Member on Parliament's Education Committee, Dr. Clement Apaak, who raised the issue on the floor of Parliament. And I'm happy that Kofi Asari, who is the Executive Director at Africa Education Watch, is also joining via Zoom. You can also join the conversation via all our social media handles. Tweet at us at PM Express, hashtag PM Express. My personal handle also is that Nana Aisha. Let's get into the full swing of this conversation when I return from this break. I'm grateful, gentlemen, for joining me. Let me start with you, Dr. Clement Apaak, because you asked that question on the floor of the House. Are you satisfied with the responses given by the minister? And what even triggered this in the first place?
Well, Aisha, first of all, let me say good evening to you and viewers across the country and beyond. As a member of Parliament for Builsa South and the Deputy Ranking Member on Parliament's Education Committee, it is part of my responsibility to try and seek answers and clarifications with regards to expenditures that government is making in as far as teaching and learning is concerned. As part of that oversight responsibility, I filed a number of questions, and I must say this is one of many. When I say many, I mean many. And the questions, I believe, which have brought us here today have to do with government's decision to procure past examination questions and to distribute to students who wrote the West African Senior School Certificate Examination in 2020. So I asked two questions around the same subject.
Okay.
One bordering on 2021, because another batch of students are preparing to write, and one bordering on those who have written already. So the first question in the series had to do with the question for this year, where I asked the minister whether government would procure and distribute examination questions to final year students preparing to write their WASSCE this year, 2021, and how that will be funded. Now, the second question is similar, but the second question has to do with how much it costs the state to procure 568,755 past examination questions for the students who wrote their WASSCE in 2020, and how, or the source of funds for the procurement of the said number of questions. So I asked three questions, but I believe these are the two that have caught public attention. The third one has to do with some mathematical sets, and that is a whole different issue. I mean, I'm sure you remember the Bluegrass Group Limited supplying some 853,009 CAPEX scientific mathematical sets at a cost of 75 Ghana cedis per unit. A total contract cost of 63,975,675 Ghana cedis. So these were the three questions that I asked today in Parliament.
And the responses, I'm asking whether you're satisfied with the responses that were given by the minister.
Well, quite honestly, I'm not. And I mean, the minister, with all due respect, was very evasive. And anyone who was in the House to witness, he was evasive.
Okay, how do you mean?
That is most unfair.
He was evasive because in Parliament, and he knows, usually when you ask a question, the minister provides a written response. And I have the questions here and the answers.
Okay.
But after you get the opportunity to rise on your feet to ask the question, and the minister then goes to present his written response, you have what we call supplementary questions. And those are intended to seek clarification, elucidate, and to query the responses that the minister has given. Okay. And when I say he was evasive, the evasiveness was not within the context of the main answers, but was within the context of the supplementary questions that I asked. And other members of Parliament also usually have the opportunity to ask supplementary questions. So that is where I say he was evasive.
Well, this is a word you used, and the Speaker of Parliament asked you to withdraw, which you did on the floor.
Yes,
so
but I'm not on the floor of Parliament.
So
explain why
So, for example,
you're correct.
The minister in the case of the first question did indicate that indeed government had already procured 446,954 past West African Senior High School examination questions from Mrs. Kingdom Books and Stationery at a unit price of 78 Ghana cedis. And if you do the computation, that then adds up to a total amount of 34 million Ghana cedis, 34,862,412 Ghana cedis. So one of my follow-up questions was, why, or if you like, whether or not there was any competitive tendering, to summarize, and as far as the selection of the said company was concerned. That is one of the follow-up questions.
But before you get to the tendering process, or whether it was competitive or sole sourcing, what exactly is your confusion with the purchasing of the past questions for the students?
Well, first of all, you would know that this has never happened before in the history of our country. It is only with, if you like, beginning with the 2020 WASSCE candidates or exams, that the nation state, through the Ministry of Education, decided to procure past examination questions and distribute to students. So you would see that the second question has to do with 2020, and the first question has to do with 2021, which seems to suggest, and as I also asked the minister, whether this had become government policy. And he said no. And I thought that was also strange, because if it was not policy, and you are doing it twice in a row, and you go to the same company, sole sourced, clearly that should be a reason to probe further. What is the justification for going to Kingdom Books 2 years in a row to procure past exam questions, and even at a rate that has varied by about some 32%, and just in the difference of 1 year. So these were some of the concerns, and I thought that they were appropriate to highlight.
Okay, so the sole sourcing bit, what's your challenge with that?
Well, first of all, I think it is curious that only that entity was given the opportunity to undertake this assignment. I don't believe it is the only entity that has the capacity to do this. And even granted that we could say in the year 2020, because of the conditions and the uncertainty, there was reasonable grounds for sole sourcing. Why does it have to be repeated the second year in a row?
But the minister explained that they used the companies that were there from NACA, and they chose Kingdom Books. Is that not what he said?
Not as far as I can remember.
No, that is not.
Not as far as I can remember at all.
That's not what the minister said.
That certainly is not.
Okay,
is not,
thankfully, Reverend is here. He will provide answers to that. But so you don't have a problem with the pricing. It's the sole sourcing issue that bothers you?
Actually, I have a problem with the pricing as well. The reason is because sole sourcing the procurement of these questions from the same company, and yet having a variation in the price, where in 2021 it is 78 Ghana cedis, and in 2020 it is 59 Ghana cedis. I think that is also a matter of concern at a time when we even know that the cost of principal textbooks, that the same students who are supposed to be beneficiaries of this intervention, for the lack of a better word, have to use, has not gone up in the period under question.
Okay.
So even the unit cost and the percentage increase in just 12 months, so to speak, is one that also raises eyebrows.
Okay, Reverend Tim, and why did it have to cost the nation so much to purchase past questions for students preparing for WASSCE?
Thank you very much, Aisha. A good evening to you and a good evening to our cherished viewers and a good evening to my colleague, Honorable Dr. Apaak. As a matter of fact, there are some fundamental inaccuracies that Honorable Apaak has stated, which I must correct at the outset. One, the Minister for Education, Dr. Yaosedichum, today was not evasive in Parliament. He was very diligent and detailed in the answering of the questions, which had been, pre-responses had been submitted and published, and supplementary questions, as many as Mr. Speaker was charitable to admit, he answered and gave sufficient responses to them. This same word was used when raised by Honorable Apaak in Parliament, and the Right Honorable Speaker, in his wisdom, ruled him out and asked him to retract, which he did so. And so I'm surprised that he would repeat same words here. Secondly, Dr. Apaak mentions the fact that 2020, 59 cedis was the unit price. That is incorrect. 59 cedis was not the unit price. It's incorrect. And I want to know where he obtained his figure from. Okay. That is incorrect. Okay. Also, as a matter of record, the amount that the unit price used for the purchase of the 361,755 past questions and examiner's report booklets was 71.25. I have the document right in my hands. 71.25, not 59, as he's stating, to create the impression that there's been a sudden jump from 2019, August 2019 to 2021, and a sudden jump from 59 to 78. Indeed, it was 71.21. And in 2020. In 2019.
Okay, for the 2020 exams.
The agreement was entered into on 20th August 2019. Okay. And now 78. There are a lot of things that account for the 9.47% increase, contrary to Dr. Apaak's assertion that there's been 32% increase. That is incorrect. Okay. That at the outset must be established. Now, the 2019 booklet was 430 pages. The 2021 booklet is going to be 457 pages. So all these must be taken into account. The third thing I would like to assert and to agree, for the first time, to agree with Dr. Apaak is that indeed this intervention is novel. This is the first time we are seeing such interventions, because under the leadership of President Akufo-Addo, we are seeing some novel interventions that are transforming our education outcomes. Never in the history of this country have we had access to secondary cycle education free for every student in public education across the country, in all 16 regions. Never before have we had that. That was novel. Never before had we procured core textbooks for every student in SHS and provided elective textbooks also in the library for their reference. Never before had that intervention occurred. Never before had we had intervention monies paid to schools such that an hour earlier to the beginning of class hours, teachers will have every intervention and give every support to students to augment the normal lessons. Never, ever in the history of our education system had these interventions gone in to prepare our students in a very confident, bold, and diligent manner for exam. Now, we must admit here that the concept of preparing a student for exam is not novel. The concept of preparing every student sitting in any particular exam has been with us all these years. Okay. Whether it is WAEC,
past questions.
Please, and I'm going to establish the fact. Sometimes certain information ought to be provided so that the public are aware and they are reminded.
Go ahead.
There are many forms of exams across the world. we have SAT, we have LSAT, Cambridge. Now we have WAEC. In all these examinations, they have sufficient material in the past, questions that had been done in the past, an examiner's report, comprehensive report of same questions that are available and accessible at a fee to students. If you had sat GRE, you have sat SAT, if you have sat LSAT, these are the Cambridge examination, these are there. You have to pay and assess it. Okay. So you don't just study and then go and sit an exam. WAEC preparation is not an assumption. Let me tell you the genesis of this arrangement. You know, WAEC is an examination body that oversees 5 countries: Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Gambia. And in sharing international best practices, they do benchmark with best practices out there. They engage Cambridge, they engage other internationally renowned examination bodies. Some of the reforms and suggestions that have engaged in their quest to improve is to be able to have an intervention for students in their revision period. There's a reason why we create revision period in our education system.
So that is why it's become necessary to pay.
Absolutely. I will make a lot of references, and I'm coming. Do you know that the calculators that Dr. Apaak was so concerned about, that you're also interested in, that you raised, was an intervention that some members of the WAEC Council had started, implementing even 3 years ahead. Nigeria, as a matter of fact, started implementing it 3 years even before. So these are some very tenable interventions that were proposed by WAEC. And how were they to execute it? They needed to engage partners that would be able to assist, because their core mandate is not to go into publishing. Their core mandate is to oversee the quality of examination and administer same. So they engaged among other publishers, and Kingdom Books was selected by WAEC and granted the sole right, to be able to publish past questions and examination report. So it is not just past questions that was compiled, it was past questions and how it was answered, and the lapses and the critical areas to look at, the detailed examiner's report on all the core subjects. This was compiled. So the sole right was granted by WAEC and by WAEC to Kingdom.
Reverend, explain to me how you came by the amount 71 points.
Yes, I'll get to that. But I want to let you appreciate the antecedents. I will get to that.
This year.
I will get to that.
And again, how you chose Kingdom Books.
I have just answered that.
Because the concern has been that Kingdom Book, for instance, is not even a publisher.
You have asked me, and I'm answering. That Kingdom Books was selected by WAEC and granted the sole right based on their assessment and what they needed
on what criteria? Right. On what criteria?
On the criteria of what had to be done. So they engaged Kingdom Books and gave them the sole right. Now, I haven't done so. And
you are not privy to the engagement, the Ministry of Education?
Privy to what engagement?
Like why WAEC has chosen Kingdom Book to be the
do you have any cause to dispute the capacity of Kingdom Books to publish what was done?
One concern has been that, there are a lot of people.
Yes, you may raise a point of the discussion around participation of other players, and that is a tenable discussion. So that is a discussion that can be had. Now, the point I'm making here is that, having granted the sole right to kingdoms, we engaged them. Now, the agreement was approved by PPA. The fact that a particular procurement has been engaged under sole sourcing does not mean that value for money considerations were disregarded. As a matter of fact, value for money consideration was duly factored in, and WAEC duly approved. WAEC duly approved, PPA duly approved this figure. I've given you 430 pages, 430-page booklet with all the past questions and examiner's report. So it's not just a piece of pamphlet for one to think. It could have been 200 cities. It could have been 300.
Yeah.
So that is a question that we must ask. So I'm stating on authority that value for money considerations were duly forward. Now the fourth point I want to establish.
No, but before you make that point, there are some who say if you had given opportunity to others, that means if it was a competitive tendering, you could have gotten a lesser price for this. I mean,
it could have been,
the purchase of the.
It could have been more expensive. You couldn't conclude on that.
Okay, let me bring in.
But before you go back, I must state on record. This is an intervention which Honorable Dr. Apaak himself has commended on record. He has commended the effort of the Ministry of Education and DES in intervening, in ensuring that we procured past questions and examiner's report for students in preparing them. Who wants their child to fail in exam? At a committee meeting in Koforidua, you commended.
I didn't.
You did.
I didn't.
And I was the only person in the room. You were on record.
It is not
to have
true.
Commended this intervention.
Okay.
You were on record.
Do you
Please,
want me to say other things that have not
if you are taking a U-turn,
so
it is not true.
Okay.
Today, if you are taking a U-turn,
it
is not true. You were not even there for the entire committee.
All right. Let me bring in. Okay. Honorable, let me bring in Kofi. Okay. You've disputed it. He said he didn't say it. Reverend, let me bring in Kofi Asari here. Honorable, let Kofi Asari come in, and then I'll come back to you. Kofi Asari is the Executive Director of Africa Education Watch. Kofi, what's your own assessment for the cost involved in the purchasing of these questions? I ask this because I know you've been putting together your own, you've been comparing prices on the market and doing your own assessment. Value for money?
Good evening and good evening to your cherished audience. I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Fantastic. Now, let me greet the panelists, Honorable Deputy Minister, and then the Honorable MP. I want to situate the discussion within the challenge of spending efficiency in Africa. Last year, African Development Bank issued its economic outlook for Africa. In that report, the African Development Bank indicated that the African continent is committing significantly its GDP towards education. Indeed, we're doing an average of 5% of GDP into education. And we were the second best in the world after the European Union.
Okay.
But the challenge in that report was that Africa, again, when it came to the spending efficiency, we were the last continent. And we were not just the last continent, but we had an average of about 50%, 25 percentage points below the last but one continent. Very sad. It's like pouring a lot of water in a basket. The report goes on to say that if Africa were able to increase our spending efficiency from average of 50% at primary and secondary level to the level of South America, which is an average of 75%, we would be able to ensure that we increase our primary school completion rates from the current 79% to 98%. What I tell you, it tells us that an underlying factor for the low primary school completion rate in Africa is resource efficiency. Come to Ghana. Our primary school completion rate is in the region of 80%. About 20% of students that enter into kindergarten 1 drop out by the time they are getting into junior high school 1. Why? Because between primary 6 and junior high school 1 alone, there are about 4,500 primary schools without junior high schools. So if I complete school in Mrekukrum, I need to start walking 10 miles to the next community to school. And the likelihood of dropouts is actually pronounced, even more pronounced. That is the tragedy of Africa and Ghana. So in 2012, when His Excellency was campaigning, and he made us a key aspect of his campaign, 2012 and 2016, a key aspect of his campaign, the need to ensure the public purse is protected, the need to improve spending efficiency, and the need to adapt competitive procedures of procuring goods and services so that we can have value for money. CSOs like us were very happy because we thought, yes, that was all we needed, because that has been our biggest challenge. Our biggest challenge has never been about policies. We have policies. Okay. We have laws. But our biggest challenge has been the system upon which these policies are built. Okay. Systems that do not assure of value for money. Okay. Efficiency in spending. So when His Excellency indicated that when he comes into government, he will ensure that, and his challenge mainly, which was actually the issue then, was that single source procurement had become a norm in the public service. And if I say the public service, I extrapolate to mean the education system, because the education sector commands the biggest chunk of the public sector resources. Single source procurement had become a norm instead of an exception. And so when he comes into power, he was going to reverse the tide. It was fantastic. What are we saying today? In the past 4 years, the Ministry of Education went for a $1.5 billion, not cedi dollar, close to 9 billion Ghana cedi loan, securitizing portions of the GET fund to construct schools and then engage in other interventions meant to improve quality. Fantastic. Go through the books. You realize that, again, restricted tendering, and single source procurement have become the norm. Again, why are we having the discussion today? We are having this discussion because politicians are trying so hard to tell us today that single source procurement suddenly provides value for money, even though it didn't provide value for money yesterday, and it will never provide value for money tomorrow. It is not true.
Okay, so let's relate it to the purchasing of the past questions for the students.
There are three issues about the purchasing of the past questions. The first issue is that now, and I'm responding to Honorable the Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Reverend Frederick, respectfully. WAEC cannot procure kingdom books. WAEC cannot select. WAEC cannot procure kingdom books.
He said.
WAEC cannot select kingdom books.
He said WAEC approved that they should be engaged. Right?
I'm saying that
they granted the right.
No, I listen very well. WAEC cannot approve kingdom books. WAEC cannot procure kingdom books.
Okay.
WAEC cannot procure or select an entity to go and produce past questions to students.
Yeah, I'm right in the studio, so
to assess.
Okay.
I have not said so.
Okay, Kofi.
Let me finish talking.
Let him finish talking. He said
so he must listen very.
Let him make his speech.
But it's misleading the public.
Kofi, just land for me.
Did not,
and then Reverend can clarify
what I've not said.
Yeah. WAEC cannot select kingdom books. The word he used was select. I was listening very well. WAEC cannot select kingdom books. Procurement entity in this arrangement
that is not what I said.
The Ministry of Education.
He should not misquote me.
So the procurement entity is the Ministry of Education. No one should bring in WAEC here. No one WAEC. The Ministry of Education has procured kingdom books. The questions are two. One, on which basis did the Public Procurement Authority grant a single source procurement approval to the Ministry of Education to enable Kingdom Books, a company that is not a publisher in the first place, to procure these books? Because if you go to the Public Procurement Law, okay, if you go to the Public Procurement Law, Section 40, I guess, Section 40, which talks about single source procurement. The conditions for single source procurement are clear and unambiguous. Was there an emergency? Was there an emergency? No. But this, so far as we are concerned, this is a recurrent expenditure. We spend the same amount of money on the same item. We spent money on the same item last year, and we budgeted for the same item this year. So there was no emergency. It was a planned expenditure. Second, is Kingdom Books the only source of past questions and, if you like, marking scheme or examiners' reports? No.
Yes. He must be informed. He must be informed.
Other publishers.
He says yes.
No, Kofi is misinformed.
Okay, so I'll give you the opportunity to respond. He's wrapping up. This is only so just let him finish and then you correct it. Okay.
Kofi is giving inaccurate information.
Please. I listen to
let him.
Second question is that,
and then I can give you the opportunity.
That's why it has the
I'm making reference to the procurement law.
Okay.
Second, is Kingdom Book the only entity?
They're confused.
It was Kingdom Book the only source that the item can be procured. That's the second condition for single source procurement. Again, no, because indeed there are several publishers in the system that have been producing past questions and compiling past questions, examiners marking scheme, and then examiners reports over the past 10 years. Some books were sells books. There are a lot of publishers in, and so it is not likely that Kingdom Books would have been the only source of getting these documents.
Aside these, okay.
The third question is this: Does the engagement of that particular entity to provide that service or good, is there a particular skill required that is so scarce and makes it necessary that that particular company must be selected and given a single source opportunity? That's the third question. That third question cannot be answered here. Cannot be answered in affirmative because compiling past questions, examiners' report, etc., is nothing skillful. These are documents on the websites.
Is misinformed.
Compiling them. And so there is nothing skillful about that. That makes it
okay.
That puts Kingdom Books in a position that they would be the best company to do it.
Aside that, answer this direct question for me. Value for money.
I'm coming to the value for money. The value for money issue is
just be quick with that.
Immediately you begin to go towards single source procurement. For a procurement you envisaged 12 months ago and budgeted for, and a procurement that is not only available at a particular source, then it means that you have already.
And that is why he's getting it wrong.
At the beginning, you did not intend to give any consideration to value for money.
All right.
That is
all right, Reverend, I'm supposed to take a break right now, but I'll give you just 1 minute to Okay, so let's take a break on PM Express. When we return, Dr. Apaak will have his time to respond to some of the issues that Reverend Intim has raised, and Reverend Intim would also have the opportunity to respond to some of the issues. I'll be right back. Welcome back to PM Express. It's been heated in the studio, but I get an opportunity to give you Dr. Apaak. Reverend, when you made your point first, Reverend,
I served in Reverend.
There were issues that Dr. Apaak wanted to respond to. So, Doc, you have the opportunity to respond.
When I finish dealing with that, he will come back to Isa.
So, Reverend Intim also has 4 minutes to respond. So, make your submission.
Is misinformed on copyright. WAEC,
the Reverend said that my calculations were wrong. And he said that the price I had quoted in terms of the price was wrong.
Okay.
But if you take the figure that the minister provided in his answer to my question for the year 2020, which was that government had spent 33,641,033 641,000 for the 3 pesos, for the 3 cities and 75 Ghana cities.
Okay.
To procure 568,755. Do the math.
Now let me
do the math. This is the minister. How can I be wrong?
You are wrong.
This is what the minister. This is what the minister said.
Why do we have?
This is what the minister said.
Why do we have correction of votes and proceedings?
I tell you that this is what I am not wrong.
Okay.
Asha, how can I be wrong? How can I be wrong?
Let me respond to that.
The minister came to Parliament and read these same figures.
Okay.
It will be captured in the Hansard.
Just this morning.
So I am not wrong.
Okay, so make your point.
So the point I am making is that
Reverend will get the opportunity to
explain.
When it comes to your turn, you will get the
Tell
opportunity.
me when you are wrong and you can deal with it. The point I am
Make
making is that if you were to divide the 33,641,000 for the 3 Ghana cities, 75 pesos, by the total number of papers, which is 568,755, it works out to 59 Ghana cities per unit.
Okay.
If I am wrong, it is because the minister provided wrong information.
I'll get your response.
It means that the minister provided
permit me
yes,
this.
please.
Okay, so
this is an official record.
It's a typo, and I'm telling you,
well,
in official record,
this is this is not.
And the minister clarified
the minister read this
in Parliament that it was a typo.
He read this. He didn't say it was a typo.
Yes,
he read it.
Okay.
He read it.
Okay. So
I am not wrong.
You're wrong.
When on this basis, the answers that the minister provided to my questions, I conclude that the rate has increased by 32%.
Okay.
That is because this is what the minister said.
provided.
And you see, the issue of me endorsing this was a falsehood. Nowhere have I ever done that. I have always argued that what our students needed the most was a conducive environment.
Okay.
And that if they had that conducive environment, where they had enough classrooms, where teachers were not overburdened, where they were not suffering from food shortages, where the right facilities were made available in terms of core textbooks, where they didn't have to share core textbooks, where they had to buy elective textbooks,
which you never were able to.
they would have done better.
Okay.
That is the argument I've always made. I've always advocated for prime conditions to allow for effective teaching and learning.
Okay.
This intervention of buying and supplying
wrap up for me your
questions and answers. But I asked the question to the minister whether this has become part of policy. He said no.
Okay.
So how do you do this 2 years in a row?
Reverend, you can now respond to the
let me
issues.
quickly dismiss.
You are not to dismiss.
Just this afternoon, I corrected 5 pages in our vote and
Everybody
procedures.
does that.
So there are errors that inadvertently could be contained. That was a typo.
At what point did you realize
that was a typo?
The minister read it.
That was a typo, and I'm giving you. It was a typo.
No,
and I'm giving you the figures. It is 71.25. Just this afternoon, now let me respond to Kofi Asare. Kofi Asare is misinformed. He must be informed that WAEC owns the sole copyright to the examination questions and the examiner's report. And so any publisher who is circulating any such material without express permission and rights from WAEC is violating, is conducting an illegality. And WAEC owning copyright to their past questions and examiner's report have reserved every right to grant that same permission to any publishing company to so reproduce. And so there is nothing wrong with WAEC selecting Kingdom books and giving them the right to reproduce. Yes, you may raise a question of engaging more multiple publishers. Yes, as and when WAEC does so and grants rights to as many publishers as possible, we would do engage them. But as we speak, we as a ministry cannot perpetrate an illegality of engaging a publisher who does not have a right from WAEC to engage them to produce material and at the outset, flouting the law. Matters of value for money none of my co-panelists here has been able to establish that the 430-page booklet, 457-page booklets could have cost any less than 78 cedis or 71.25 cedis. So let me open a website. If you go to Leeds University website, if you go to Cambridge, all these institutions, and if you are minded to know what Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and the Gambia are doing in preparing their students for exam, it's very tenable and diligent, the steps that Ghana is taking. Of course, these are very novel interventions, as I indicated, because we have never seen such remarkable results that had been produced. 411 out of the 465 students that scored 8 A's in the just ended 2020 WASSCE examination came from Ghana, 88% of them. Something must be accounting for that. So any attempt to create the impression that it's a misplaced priority to prepare our students to be able to pass, to prepare the child of the cocoa farmer, to prepare the child of the cocoa seller, to prepare the child. There may be other people who have the means. They buy as much as $2,000 per pack to train their children and prepare them for various exams. So if that child out there in Asinkru, in Zuarungu, in Axim, is to procure 71 cedi book page with all the past questions and examiner's report, and government is paying that, and you call it a misplaced priority, then you must reorient.
So for you, there's value for money.
So there's value for money, and it's justified. And so when you look at the figure, you must be minded that there are over 446,954 children who must benefit
from this,
who are going to sit the exam and must benefit. So grateful. That, in all good intent, that is the perspective or the context that we must situate this discussion within.
I'm grateful, Honorable Dr. Clement Apaak, for coming. Reverend Fojo is the Deputy Education Minister. Dr. Clement Apaak is the Deputy Ranking Member on the Education Committee. And I thank you so much, Kofi Asari, for also joining the discussion. This is a conversation that has started. I bet you will be revisiting this topic as the time approaches for the students to get to the examinations. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Many thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of our programs.